Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Bull City Coordinators Duke Football Coverage Podcast. Follow us on our website, bullcitycoordinators.com. Send us an email, bullcitycoordinators@gmail.com. Check us out on X. I'm still calling it Twitter. Sorry. Check us out on Twitter at Duke FB Coverage, where you can tweet at us or post at us, which is what they want you to say now. We're on all the social medias. We're on the gram. We are on Spoutable. We're on Reddit. You can find us at Duke FB Coverage. Not on Facebook though. So all but one, part of Meta, whatever. Okay, so you all listened to our last episode, season 4, episode 1. This is season 4, episode 2. We are recording this on August 21st, 2023, a little bit in advance of the Labor Day game to kick off what is hopefully going to be a good season for the Blue Devils. And as you know, this season, I am bringing on journalists, beat writers, people who cover the opponents, giving you a chance to, if you will, get to know your opponents. And our next guest covers the Clemson football Tigers for the state newspaper. Went to some crappy low-rent school with a terrible journalism program located on a hill somewhere in North Carolina. I don't think it's in business any longer. I think it got closed down because of budget shortfalls or something. Not really sure. But the state is based out of Columbia, South Carolina, provides excellent sports coverage for all South Carolina-related sports, all the teams there. And our next guest does just that for the Clemson Tigers. Chapel Fowler, how are you, sir?
Ben, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. Thanks for the interesting introduction. I'm happy to be on, and I appreciate you. Very clinical in the way we set this up months in advance. It's probably my longest out scheduled podcast interview, so I'm really excited to do this. So thanks for having me again.
Glad to do it. What's interesting is people who are not lawyers do not schedule the way that I schedule. So there's a big adjustment.
Yeah. I love it. I have no complaints.
Well, good. Tell us a little bit about how you ended up at the state and what you're doing there now.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Well, like you mentioned, I'm a UNC alum. I'm Carolina's born and bred. My dad has worked in Charlotte as long as I've been alive. So I grew up in Denver, North Carolina, just about 25 minutes out of uptown near Lake Norman, and went to high school there, 4 years at UNC, studied journalism. Had 2 jobs out of school up there in the Triangle, one at a smaller local paper, one at the Fayetteville Observer, where I think y'all may have shouted out some story I did on Chandler Rivers, the corner from Texas. I've interacted with Bull City coordinators before in a very wholesome Twitter way, so I appreciate that. But yeah, that kind of took me up until summer 22, and I've been in the States since June 21st of last year, so just got over my 1-year anniversary there. But yes, I do our Clemson football stuff, a few other things, but definitely mainly focused on that program right there. So yeah, that's kind of my little backstory in a nutshell.
Okay, and getting the Clemson Tigers gig had to be pretty good for you. I know from growing up just outside of Clemson in Central, there's a lot of orange there. It's a big thing for that area. But in getting ready for tonight, I also saw that you're a member of the state guild. So could you tell us a little bit about that? I'm asking for a couple of reasons, one of which is I like the antiquated term guild. And also I appreciate it as a guy who has a book about the IWW sitting on my bookcase somewhere around here. So I had a college professor who taught a lot about Union history. Can you tell us a little bit about the state guild?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to sing the praises of the state guild. That was something I never, had an opportunity to do before I got to the state. Joining union, and as you know, like journalists' unions are not a recent development. There's a history there, but it's just in the last few years that they've started to pop up and pop out. And I love it, man. They do a great job, and I just told so many people when I signed my union card, I could not have been more happy and proud to do that. I love what unions do and how they represent people that maybe haven't been always fully or wholly represented at the bargaining table and things that they should be represented on, whether that's pay or hours or expenses, or there's a million things you can get on, right? I love having that support in my corner gives me a lot of flexibility. I'm not in any leadership positions. We have a lot of wonderful staffers who do such a good job there. I mean, Josh Bouch, Joe Bustos, Lou Mayocelli. I'm forgetting a few, but I reaped the benefits of a lot of people that worked really hard to get this thing going. But I'm happy to pay my dues and plug it in my bio, which is why we're talking about it right now. And I think it's a really important thing for any newsroom to do. And I've certainly been a proud card carrying member for a little bit over a year now. So that's a fun question. I didn't think I would get that one on a Clemson preview podcast. So,
well, we could spend a lot of time talking about the history of union movements in the South. It's not something that gets a lot of coverage, but it is something that is definitely it's a different history when you go back there. But be that as it may, that's a much different podcast to go into. Now, let's talk a little bit. Let's go ahead and jump right into what we're supposed to talk about, which is the Tigers and Duke as well. I want to start by talking just generally about Clemson. So if you could tell us the biggest strengths of the team this year and the biggest unknowns of the team this year.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when I think biggest strengths, I think defensive experience. If you look at the list of guys that opted to return to come back to Clemson for their COVID fifth year, their COVID sixth year, it's a lot of career games, it's a lot of career snaps, it's a lot of career starts, and some good players, man. I mean, I think Dabo Swinney talked to us a few days ago, and this had come out before, but just to hear it directly from him, I think he said that they had two defensive linemen who had day 2 NFL draft grades, Rupert Rowe and Tyler Davis, and both of those guys decided to come back. Same thing on the offensive side. I was talking defense, but their centers back defensively. Who else? I mean, 2 safeties, a corner, Xavier Thomas, who somehow came into college football in 2018 and is still chugging along. So there's a lot of guys that kind of just know what they're doing. And as a big pickup basketball enthusiast, I know and respect and understand and actually covet the power of grown man strength, which you don't really get when you're 18. Maybe you do get when you're 24. So I think when I think strengths, it starts there. Obviously, if you look at, the 247 blue chip ratio, that metric they have, that you need a certain number of 4 stars and 5 stars to legitimately be in contention for a title. Clemson's well within that group again. They've signed a lot of strong recruiting classes recently. They're always going to have the bodies. It's a matter of execution, whether that's Will Shipley at running back or Antonio Williams at wide receiver, Kate Klubnik at quarterback. There's relatively improving. They're all there. When I think shortcomings, the biggest questions, I think of receivers, first of all. Clemson's had that wide receiver U moniker for a while now. But rightfully so, that's a little up in the air. Last 2 years have just been nowhere close to the production that they're used to, with your DeAndre Hopkinses and Sammy Watkinses and more recently Mike Williams, Hunter Renfrow, Deion Kane, Ray McLeod, Amari Rodgers, the list goes on. That has not been the case the last 2 years. They have been, subpar at best. I think led the ACC in drops 2 years ago, had the lowest amount of yards by a leading receiver in the ACC last year. Antonio Williams had 600 something. I think that was worse among all AC teams for their receiving leader. They've kind of lacked that big body, get up and make a play when we needed production that kind of defined those CFP teams. And they've got a roster of dudes, a lot of high recruits. Cole Turner, who went from 2-star recruit to ACC championship game and Orange Bowl starter. Antonio Williams was really good last year. Adam Randall was coming back from an ACL and started to come on late. The guys are all there, but if you're going to be an elite CFP contending and winning team, you need receivers that really flash. I think about Marvin Harrison Jr. last year for Ohio State and just that absolute roster of studs they have over there. And same for Georgia, same for Alabama. That's a position group that could get to that level, but that's to me, that's the biggest concern. And then I think besides that, 2 more things. The secondary was fine last year. It wasn't great by their standards. Andrew Makuba, was the ACC Defensive Rookie of the Year in 2021. Definitely took a step back in 22. Now, to be fair, there's injuries there, and he was playing out of position due to injuries at other positions. But he had a drawback and is trying to get back to that elite level. They just had too many miscommunications. You probably saw bits and pieces of the Wake Forest game, which actually went on during that stretch of time where Aaron Judge was right on the verge of breaking the AL home run record, and college football fans took turns getting pissed off at whose game was getting split screened by ESPN while he was at bat. Their secondary got torched in that Wake Forest game, and it got a lot better down the line. But that group still has strides to make. And then quarterback, Cade Klubnik, he looked great against UNC. He looked like you would imagine an 18-year-old true freshman might look in the Orange Bowl. I think his kind of game-to-game performance is probably going to fall somewhere in between there. He'll run out of the pocket. He'll make a crazy throw, but he'll dazzle too. He'll throw an interception, but he'll go back 25 yards and chuck it Johnny Football style and get a first down the next play. So that they're locked in on him. He's their guy. He's certainly got the talent, but I don't think you can't be preaching national championship or bust from day one with a quarterback with that little experience. So top to bottom, they always have the guys to compete for the ACC to be on the verge of a CFP spot. But the execution just wasn't there last year. And college football is such a game of margins. They essentially missed the playoff by a point. They lost by 1 point to South Carolina. If they had beaten South Carolina in the championship game, results held from their ACC title game and all the other ones, they would have been in the playoff. They would have been first seed. So they were close. They didn't get there, and that's their standard. So that's what they're trying to get back to some questions along the way.
Okay, and that's that. Those are some good things to point out there. I want to follow up on the receivers. Okay. You talked about the receivers, but when you got a running back like Will Shipley, how much can he do to make up for some deficiencies with the running game, and especially with a veteran offensive line?
Yeah, it's a great point about Shipley, and it's really true. It's Shipley. It's also his top backup, Phil Maffa, really strong player, and started a number of Power 5 schools, I'm sure. But yeah, those two can take a load off for sure. One of the issues last year with the former offensive coordinator, Brandon Streeter, who Dabo Swinney ended up firing, which kind of went against everything he's preached for so long about, bloom where you're planted. And, Streeter was a buddy of many years. One of the reasons he cut ties with him was the run game just at times. Shipley is as even killed as they tell him. After that South Carolina loss, he was saying it as many terms with a lot of stipulations. Like, when the game was on the line and one of the best players giving the ball, he did not get the ball as much as he should have in key moments. When they started losing, his carries dropped, and his best games were when he was touching the ball like an obscene amount of times. So Garrett Riley's system, and a few people have pointed this out, Garrett himself, Dabo, I think at TCU last year when they were that, snazzy, high-scoring, run-and-gun, air raid offense, I think they still ran the ball on a comfortable majority of their snaps, something like 55 or something. So Garrett Riley certainly cares and wants to establish the run game. And Shipley's the guy to do it with. He stays remarkably healthy, considering he's also their lead kick return and was pretty good at that too. So yeah, that's definitely a way to kind of alleviate that receiver pressure. Shipley and Moffitt. Again, you mentioned the O-line. Yeah, they're returning 4 or 5 starters. Now, the one they're losing is a big one. Is their starting left tackle. He won the blocking trophy, Jordan McFadden. He was like a 5th-round draft pick by the Chargers. So, if you're going to lose an offensive lineman and be worried about it, that's the one to do it at. And they're still kind of working through that left tackle rotation. This guy, Tristan Lee, a former 5-star recruit, is the favorite. But that's still a little up in the air. But again, that's another group with a lot of experience. A lot of experience in their specific positions. They shifted the offensive line a good bit last year. They had a longtime guard, Will Putnam, playing center. They had their right tackle, Walker Park, shift inside to right guard, and they had Blake Miller, who came in as a high school, highly rated left tackle, play right tackle. So they've got a kind of a second iteration of those 4 guys back usual. And that also includes Marcus Tate, who's their left guard that's coming off injury. But it's definitely better. It's the right word to use. So yeah, running game can alleviate a little bit of that, but to me, it comes down to 2-minute drill, game on the line, title hoops on the line. You still would like to have that guy who can just get up and get it on a bomb 40 yards downfield. And I don't know if they exactly have that right now. That may develop, but I think it's still going to come down to that. If you're talking about like the 1 or 2 plays that could define what you do or don't do this season.
Well, that was a good discussion about the possible strengths of the running game, and what I had read about the Riley offense, the Garrett Riley offense at TCU indicated that he really, really does like to run the ball. So if you're going to play Clemson, that's something that you're going to have to look out for. One thing that I would like to ask you about, you mentioned some of the changes, you mentioned some of the unknowns, you mentioned some of the possibilities for the team. Tell us where the team is on finding an identity, if they figured it out yet, or if they look like they've figured it out. I mean, you may not know till you get to week 1 or 2, but then also talk to us about the ceiling for the team and the floor for the team.
For sure. One of the things that I've heard more directly and frequently than I did at any point last season is just players just saying it straight up. We want to win a national championship. We think we can win a national championship. And some video came out. The team had a motivational speaker named Eric Thomas, and I guess Dabo talked as part of that, and essentially, challenged the team. Every class I've had here since 2013 has won a national championship. You're on the clock, right? That's kind of the identity that I've seen. Now getting that done is much easier said. But they are very, like, title or bust. The last 2 seasons are not our expectations. We think we can get better. We know we can get better. We want to get better. Identity-wise, I think that's kind of the all-encompassing point that I've been hearing. And they lacked that at times last year. They got punched in the mouth at Notre Dame. Got allowed, 280-something rushing yards. Didn't really know how to, explain it afterward. And losing to South Carolina with those silly mistakes and mental errors, and fumbling a punt return on 2 minutes left when your defense is just giving you an opportunity to win the game. Like, title winning teams don't do that. So it's cleaning up on the little things, but I think they're definitely trusting in themselves that they have the bodies to go out and do this. Do I think they can as of now? No. But I think if you're talking identity, it's definitely title or bust. And then what was the second part you mentioned right there?
Well, one thing that I wanted to ask you about, and I'll segue a little bit into something else, which is you're talking about last year maybe not being acceptable for Clemson. I will say, and I've had this debate with a lot of people, there's a lot of programs in the country who would take 21 wins in 2 years as down years. And that's kind of where I am with the Tigers. And the voting that I did for the pod poll had them ranked very high. I think we might be undervaluing the Tigers right now. But I wonder if you could just go ahead and ask, or go ahead and tell us a little bit about what you think the ceiling is for this team, and then what the floor is for this team.
Yeah. Well, I think when you think about that, you look at the record first. Their record of 10 or more wins in a season. I think you're going for a 13th straight year of that this year. So if you want to talk floor, stats kind of tell you that's a floor, which is a pretty good floor. Like you were saying, there's so many teams that would kill for that. So a 10-win floor is kind of the floor to me. That's kind of when I think about predicting stuff or projecting stuff. As crazy as it is, you can't give them that. There's so many games in the ACC that could come down to one play, this or that. I tend to think that if you have all those 4- and 5-star recruits I was mentioning, that those close games probably swing your way more often than they don't, and maybe steal you an extra win or two where other teams wouldn't get it. But yeah, I'd say floor, 10 games, ceiling. I think this team, it has enough to make the CFP semifinal. If they're the 4 seed and Georgia's the 1 seed, do I feel good about their chances? No. But people probably said the same thing about them facing Alabama in those 2 title games. They beat them in, and that other one they were right on the verge of beating them in until the very end. So in terms of floor ceiling, I kind of think about it as 10 wins is the floor. And, if that doesn't happen, that's going to be a big deal up in those parts. And ceiling, I'd say, we're so close last year to making the CFP that's not an unrealistic possibility to get into that final 14 field before the expansion. I don't know if national championships, to me, that's not the ceiling for this team. They could prove me otherwise, but I'm certainly not going to be going around predicting that on podcasts like this one. I think they're in that, whether you want to say it's tier 1A, 1B, or tier 1, tier 2, there's a drop off from tier 1 to tier 2, and I think they are tier 2 right now, which is much better than tier 5 or 10 or wherever you want to put Georgia Tech right now. But I don't think they are elite. right now. Maybe they're just one elite or just rock solid.
Well, we're throwing some shade at the Yellow Jackets right now. I think Jeff, who listens to this podcast, can be a little upset about that, but we'll see. I personally would have gone for an attack on UVA. That they're not looking good. It looks like a very, very bad year for them. But that's me. We all have our different preferences of which team to dog. But I want to switch a little bit and talk to you about the Blue Devils this game that's coming up on Labor Day, and I want you to kind of put yourself in maybe a Blue Devil fan or someone who covers the Blue Devils mindset and say, looking at Clemson and looking at what Duke did last year, what could the Blue Devils do to get some positive yardage? Where could they maybe put a dent in the machine that is the Clemson Tigers?
Yeah, I think it's an all-time Riley Leonard, right? That's what you need to stay in this, to win this, to jazz up those fans and that insane atmosphere. I can't wait for it. Clemson is, I don't know, is any team perfect in defending running quarterbacks? Probably not. But I just saw them get gashed so many times last year. I mean, Garrett Schrader is not the best athlete in the world. Syracuse's quarterback. He had something like 20 carries for 76 yards and probably even more if you took out the sack yardage in that Clemson-Syracuse game last year, which is one of those right down to the wire on the ropes games that I mentioned that bounced Clemson's way last year. Maybe it doesn't this year. I think it starts with quarterback. It starts with Leonard. It's really cool to hear him at ACC kickoff. He is a charming, charismatic guy. What a recruiting win and recruiting find for them. I'm not really sure his Duke backstory, but he's certainly in position to do some good things this year. I think it's him first of all. I was impressed. I was reading something in the news a few days ago about Jordan Moore, who converted to receiver and how well he played. I mentioned coverage busts are still a very big issue for the secondary until I see otherwise, and they would tell you as much. So whether that's a few big play pops. I mean, shoot, we're talking about Georgia Tech last Labor Day when Clemson opened at Georgia Tech in the Falcons Dome. Georgia Tech was hanging with them for a while, and they popped a number of big plays. They had a mobile quarterback at that point. He gashed a little bit. I think some hurry-up offense is never going to hurt you. And I think defensively, it's just it's knowing and realizing that Kate Klubnik is still, a work in progress. Yes, he's a 5-star recruit. Yes, he's the reigning ACC championship game MVP. But he's also the guy who, with 13 seconds left, took like the sack that you just absolutely cannot take in the Orange Bowl and got yelled at by Dabo Swinney walking off the field to the locker room entirely because he's 18 years old and still learning the position. So I think maybe even the fact that you're getting them in week 1 and not like week 8 could be a plus there too. You're getting week 1 of this new offensive scheme that's supposed to turn heads and change lives, as opposed to down the line when you'd assume they're going to be more developed and more set on here's what we're doing, here's what we're not doing. So I think just the newness of the offense is maybe an opportunity for defense to capitalize, and then just on a special teams note, Clemson graduated like the best kicker in school history, BT Potter. Was there 5 years, set a bunch of records. I think he has actually ended up appearing in the most games ever by a Division I football player, is 68 or 69 across whatever research their SIDs can find. Their new guy, Robert Gunn III, they brought him in on scholarships. They obviously feel good about him. But I mean, I haven't seen him kick yet. So yeah, I don't know if Clemson ends up settling for a field goal. Maybe that's not the worst thing in the world, given that inexperienced kicker in a raucous night game atmosphere on ESPN. So maybe you get spotted 3 points one way or another just by first game jitters from a new kicker replacing a guy who really was really steady and excellent and almost automatic for them. So in terms of one little thing here or there across all 3 phases, that's what comes to mind.
Okay, one other area I'd like to go over with you before we get maybe into prediction areas, and it may be more than just the one area, but one thing that I definitely do want to ask you about is you've talked a lot about the running game. Both of us have, and we've talked about Will Shipley, and the Blue Devils run a 4-2-5 defense, and it has a lot of strengths, especially in a pass-heavy football world in which we live. One thing that it may not be great at is running the ball. So I'm just curious what your thoughts are about what Duke may have to try to do to contain the run, and if we should expect to see a heavy dose of Shipley getting the ball.
I think a heavy dose of Shipley is definitely in order. They really did the same thing last year in that opener. I think when in doubt, lean on your running game, right? Clemson was not great in its opener last year. Offense looked all sorts of ways, and once they really started just feeding it to their guys, just I don't know, it's such a steadying force, right? A few good runs can really settle down an offense in ways that maybe a few short passes can't. Shipley is going to come in. I think he set out all of spring practice, if I remember correctly, and seems very healthy, very locked in. I mean, you hear this from everybody, but the idea of best shape of my life. We heard that from him a few weeks ago. He's obviously a preseason All ACC, reigning All ACC at 3 positions. Can take a lot of snaps, can take on a heavy work. But I'm actually interested to see how many more passes, if at all, he catches this year, because he has not caught a ton at Clemson so far. And I think maybe that can be a extra wrinkle of the rally offense worth watching. But yeah, I mean, I think a heavy dose of Shipley is to be expected. I think, again, if I put myself in Duke defense's mind, Clemson has a proven running back. Clemson does not have many proven receivers. So if you're going to choose between the two of those and you feel good enough about your pass defense, your corners, your safeties, and maybe that's something you can inform me on. And if they feel that's kind of a position of strength, there may be one that's up in the air also. I don't think the idea of loading the box and forcing a quarterback who obviously has some talent but has not showed it consistently on a game-to-game basis, because he's literally started 2 games in his life in college, to beat you instead of the proven running back who you and everybody else in the conference knows is a rock-solid dude that doesn't fumble much and scores a lot of touchdowns and is a big part of that Clemson offense. I don't think that's the worst defensive strategy if I'm going to elko myself for a second thinking about it that way.
Well, that's a good way to put it. One thing is, since you asked me about the secondary, and I think before we get into the secondary, one of the things that we need to talk about is the linebacking core. That's really where there's a lot of unknown. Losing Shaka Hayward and also losing Rocky Shelton, who didn't play a whole lot last year except on the kicking teams. He transferred to Miami. He had a lot of depth and a lot of experience. There's issues with that, about how that happened, why it happened, that aren't, bad for Rocky. It's just he was kind of a victim of an administration change, which can happen to anybody. Okay. But where I'm worried about and where I'm particularly concerned if I'm the Blue Devils coming into this game is once you get past that defensive line with Franklin and Carter and Vincent and Oben and Peebles. I may be missing a couple of people here. If I am, I apologize. But that's a deep, deep group. The Will and the Mike positions for the linebackers, there's a lot of unknowns. Cam Dillon played great last year, but he played alongside Shaka, and I think the jury's still out on exactly what he can do on his own, kind of as more of a leadership position maybe than he had last year, from the fact that naturally you're thinking, okay, well, Shaka's here. I'm playing alongside Shaka. It's a little bit different when he's not there, and you've got to be kind of the guy. Not criticizing Cam Dillon in any way. I'm just saying it's an unknown. Dorian Mayusi, I like him. He plays hard. He's been hurt a lot. Hopefully he can stay healthy. So there's just a lot that we don't know. In the secondary, you've got more. You got Chandler Rivers. You got Jalen Stinson. You got Brandon Johnson, Joshua Pickett. You got good guys. You got Al Blades who's come in. But there's been some concern about it. We also had a transfer come back in, Jeremiah Lewis. I don't know how much he's going to play. The secondary last year ended up being a strength of the program. I think it may just take a little bit to settle, but Chandler Rivers can really settle that group down and be a leader. But if I'm Chapel Fowler, other than building a time machine to go back in time and not go to the University of North Carolina, the thing that I would be thinking about is where Clemson can make some headway here is probably going to be attacking the linebacker position, because that's a big unknown for the Blue Devils.
Yeah, and that also reminds me, I need to mention Clemson's very high on I think he's going to be a junior this year. Jake Brenningstool is their number one tight end. He's replacing Davis Allen, who's another NFL draft pick, was really productive for them and really came on in the last few years of his career. They call him Brenny. Garrett Riley has talked a lot about how, at least to him, outside of a quarterback, tight end might be the most involved position in his offense. It's the one where you're asked to do the most plays. So the idea of that kind of safety blanket, big play pop, Brenningstool did a lot of that last year. He's on the skinnier side. I think he's been trying to add some weight. He's not the most pure blocker, but he is he's very adept as a receiver. So yeah, if you're thinking linebacker, I guess that could kind of fit into that point as well. That's definitely someone they're hoping, and I do assume, I think that's going to happen. Brenningstool is going to be a lot more involved this year. He's going to see a lot of targets, a lot of catches, had a number of big plays on seam routes and that type of stuff last year. He can really glide and was a really high recruit in his class, and is entering that third year, whereas a lot of times it's make or break, or if you're going to truly break out, year 3 is the time to do it. So yeah, thinking about linebackers, that also popped up. Glad to mention him with all those unproven receivers. They do have a semi-proven tight end who I think will probably end up being second on the team in like catches, yards, touchdowns, some combination of those three. He's gonna be pretty productive for them.
Well, if you've got a young quarterback, and I've had this conversation with Carlos Ray on Twitter and in person and through text message, and about every way you can have that conversation with somebody. An unproven quarterback's best friend in the passing game can be the tight end, can be the running back, but it can be a lot better if it's the tight end. And you can comment on this a little bit more, where there's a pretty, I'm guessing, a somewhat significant age gap between us. When I was growing up, the tight end was a mobile offensive lineman in some respects. That's not the case now. They're much more athletic. They're much quicker. They're much faster. So that's somewhere where the Tigers could definitely attack the Blue Devils defensively and put a lot of pressure on these generally unknown linebackers.
Yeah, I'm 25, so I grew up on a little Greg Olson, Antonio Gates, a huge Panthers fan here. I believe in Bryce. You were talking tight end. That's why I'm drafting Hayden Hurst in all my fantasy leagues this year. But yeah, I grew up watching tight ends turn into the exact opposite. And I do think you talk about a safety blanket, that's huge. A lot of times I think football can be as simple as what works on Madden. There's a reason everybody does 4 verticals and throws the tight end on Madden. I think it's a worthy thing to consider and keep in mind. And yeah, I think that's definitely something that's going to help Klubnik a lot. I'm trying to remember how Brenningstool's targets looked in the Orange. I don't think he got that many. But Kate is definitely something that him and Garrett Riley both talked about, is just the idea of calming down, taking a breath, realizing that no, this isn't Texas football, and you can't, like I mentioned, run backward 30 yards and make the play happen. You're an excellent athlete, you're really talented, but everybody around you and everybody trying to sack you right now is also in that category. So the smart things, running back dump offs, 5-yard gains instead of 30-yard pushes down the field that are getting intercepted. That's something that he's talked about wanting to get better at. And Riley has talked about too, take the layups and just get the ball in play. It's another kind of one of his mantras. So whether that's Brenningstool or anybody else, I think kind of smart, short gains. DJ Uiagalelei, if you watched any Clemson last year, would throw a number of those just like straight into the ground. That was he never really got his throwing motion totally refined there to the point where he and the coaching staff wanted it. Just a few of those flat routes, seam routes. A lot of those that probably should have been completed before, kind of because of who we're throwing them. So that's definitely something where Tate has talked about getting better, and I think could be a kind of smart complement to this big air raid, run and gun, shootout, 50-yard chunk plays, every other snap offense that Clemson is hoping to bring in with Garrett Riley hire.
Well, that's an excellent conversation that we've had now about the strengths of Clemson, where maybe Duke can attack them, what to expect. What I want to do now as we get towards the end part of the interview is we'll get predictions on who's going to win. And we're going to start with you. We're going to then throw it over to me. And then as I'm doing this year, I'm having, like we did last year, I'm going to have guest predictions. And the first guest for this podcast of a game prediction is going to be from Dad. So he is going to shoot me an email and we'll edit it in and we'll get his score here after this interview and see what he's got to say. So why don't we start with you, Chappell? Why don't you tell us what your prediction is for this game? Give us the winner and give us the score, which it makes perfect sense to do this, now before the game even starts and before we've even seen the team play either team play one snap. I mean, it's the perfect thing to do, which is a game prediction, but everybody loves it. So let's hear your thoughts on who's going to win.
Yeah, if that ever fell out of favor with the public, I think both of us might be out of business. I thought about this. I assumed I was going to get a prediction question. I am going to go Clemson, and I'm going to go 34-28. And I think this is going to end up maybe like about the Florida State game did last year from Clemson, where they kind of inched away maybe in the third quarter or so. Clemson loves coming out in the third quarter and really turning it on after a lackluster first half. I can't tell you how many times that happened last year. I could see anything from like, I don't know, maybe it's 14-14 at halftime, I know Duke's going to punch him in the mouth early, I'll tell you that much. I'm not worried about that. I think it's going to be a competitive game, start to finish. I think Clemson will probably, I mentioned that score of mine. Maybe it becomes 34-14 or 28-14 in the third quarter, and maybe it seems like there's a gap there. But I think Duke's going to close it. Florida State last year, that was a game. Everybody had their game stories already written on that one. And suddenly Jordan Travis went, absolutely berserk. had one of the nastiest spin moves in the end zone to turn a would-be safety into a 35-yard gain, and suddenly it's 34-17 or whatever, and then suddenly it's 34-28, and suddenly Clemson is needing an onside kick to survive and get out of Tallahassee with a win. I could see something like that happening, and it's Labor Day night, late kick. We're not going to be talking to Dabo until like 1:30 a.m. Like, who knows? We might get a little crazy in Durham at Wallace Wade, but 34-28 Clemson is going to be my prediction. And I think probably the point spread, I'm not sure if you've looked at it recently, is probably a little bit over that. I think Clemson is probably going to be favored by, 8 or 9 or something, and 10. I haven't looked in a while. But I think Duke will cover for sure. I think it's going to be competitive. I trust who they are. I was really impressed with them last year. Every single time I looked down, I'd be like, oh my gosh, like that Duke team is winning again and beating this Power 5 team and taking it to this ACC team. And I was really impressed with what Elko did with them last year. And I really do like Leonard. I think, any mobile quarterback in 2023 is a good quarterback. So I think it'll be a competitive one. I'm certainly looking forward to being out there and covering it. First time in Wallace Wade in a while for me. I think I went there in the COVID year, covering as a freelancer, and I went to college in 2018. That was the, second or third last game of the Larry Fedora era, and you can definitely feel that sense in his post-game presser. I'm looking forward to it, and I'm going to go 34-28 Clemson. That is the formal prediction without either team having played a snap, which, like you said, is the perfect time to do this. And I'm interested to hear yours and your dad's as well.
Okay. A couple things before I get into my prediction. The over under here is 56.5. The spread is 13. I also am going to take Clemson to win this game. And guys, I know some of you on the team listen to this, and I'm not hating on you guys. I'm not disrespecting you guys by picking this. If you read bullscitycoordinators.com, you know that I follow trends. I will say this. Here's why I'm going to take the Tigers in this game. They have to be honest, they have the track record right now that Duke just doesn't have. And because of that, and because of what even in 2 down years you have seen from Clemson, this is still a team with a lot of guys who have a chance to go to the NFL. It's a much different football culture at Clemson, having grown up there. It's just different. This program hasn't done worse than 10 wins since 2011. Okay. You have to take that into account. They played in the national championship game 4 times not too long ago. Okay. This is a good program. It's a solid program. And the last 2 years, 10-3, 11-3, finished 16th and 12th in the country in the coaches poll, 14th and 13th in the AP poll. There's a lot of talent there. Now, as to the score, here's where I'm going with this, and I want to give some reasoning. This is a very senior, elder, red shirt heavy team for Duke. That's very uncommon for them. This is one of the older teams they've had in a long time. That can be very helpful for them, and it can allow them to compete and stay in games longer, maybe than you would otherwise think. But this is a very veteran team. It's going to be a good team. They believe in each other. They've got really talented guys. They've got a really, really good offensive line. That offensive line is really deep. The defensive line is really deep. Chandler Rivers back there in the secondary, I think, will help. Linebacking core is unknown. It looks like Eli Pankel is going to be out for a while, but the receiving core is deep. Riley Leonard is Riley. The running game, I do think the running game is going to need to prove itself a little bit as far as having a guy be the guy. Duke does like to go running back by committee. We talk about the stable there, but I think one guy is going to need to step out and take the reins, get the torch or take the torch and run with it. So we need to see that actually occur. I think it can happen. I think Duke has a lot going for it. The team has a lot going for them, but I just don't think that there's enough to overtake the Tigers because Clemson is still Clemson. And I know that sounds dumb, and I know it sounds obvious, but they're still the Tigers at the end of the day. I think it's going to be a competitive game. I think it's going to be a good game. I think it's going to be like the 2018 Duke-Clemson game where Duke came out, punched the Tigers in the mouth, hung around all through the first half. The game slowly got away from them. I'm going to go with, just because I think that Clemson's defense and their running game are going to combine to turn it more to a Clemson style of game that I grew up watching when Danny Ford was the head coach. I think it's going to put a little bit of pressure on Duke to be coming from behind. I'm going to go with a score of 35-20, but I think it's going to expand, like Chappell said, later in the third quarter, maybe to the fourth quarter. So that's why I'm taking Clemson. I am going to be there on Labor Day, on Monday. I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be a lot of fun. I hope the Blue Devils prove me wrong, but I just think, looking at all the trends, looking at all the factors, looking at all the equities, as we say in the law, it's just leaning towards Clemson. But one big advantage, though, is we're catching Clemson early, maybe before that identity takes shape. So those are my thoughts, Chappell.
Yeah, very well said. The idea of kind of running them down over time, that's, again, I keep coming back to that. And I know TCU totally bucked that trim about the 247 blue chip ratio. But then again, TCU also, lost by 55 points worse margin in a national championship game, I think ever, or at least in the last modern era. That 247 idea that if you have more dudes on your roster, that's going to help you out. That's going to help you win those games. That's going to give you that extra a little late when everybody's tired and hurting and just wants to, have a final result and have the clock hit zeros. I think that's something that Clemson certainly has, and having that is one thing and deploying it is another. But they've talked a lot about depth at a few positions that maybe didn't have it a few years ago. And I think that's definitely a differentiating factor. And yeah, you and Steve Spurrier both will be willing on the Blue Devils. So again, beautiful city. I went to UNC, but I enjoyed the heck out of Durham, man. I'm already thinking about the coffee shop I'm going to go to. I'm forgetting the name, but it's somewhere on Main Street, and I've gone there with my cousin who just graduated from there and is actually in med school there. Shout out Jackson Kathy. Going to plan out my food and coffee stuff earlier in the day because it's always a good day to be in the Triangle. So I'm really looking forward to it. And I think that's a very well-reasoned prediction. And I'm glad this year we're kind of in lockstep on that. It's good to feel like you're talking about when a lawyer agrees with you. So Now we just got to get Dad's prediction next. So yeah, I'm excited to hear that one roll out whenever the pod does drop leading into game week.
Well, Dad, I have to be careful saying this because he listens and he may take exception to this, but Dad's always very high on the Blue Devils. Now, you mentioned Steve Spurrier. I grew up watching the Blue Devils right after Spurrier came and left. I think in Dad's mind, Steve Spurrier is still coaching there in his heart of hearts, and we're going to see the fun and gun all the time. Dad is always very high on the Blue Devils, despite what happened after Spurrier left Durham and until Cutcliffe got there, that era where I'm not even sure there was a football team. So we kind of jokingly refer to it when he gets high on Duke is we ask him how things are in Richlandia. His name's Richard. So we'll see. We'll see what his prediction is. I'm looking forward to it, and we'll go ahead and drop it in now. Okay, we now have the, as promised, game prediction for Duke Clemson from Dad. Dad is on the phone now. We're editing this in, dropping it. We're recording it on August 23rd of 2023. Dad, this is your first time on the podcast. Is that correct?
That's true. That's true. Excited and honored to be a part of this.
All right. Well, it took 4 seasons, but we were finally able to work you in. So here you are. You've got your pick for Duke versus Clemson, Labor Day evening.
I'm related because there's no telling how long it might have taken if I weren't related.
Well, you know what they say. There's family that you admit to having, and then there's family that admits to having you, and I'll just let the listeners figure out what that means and how to interpret that.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So,
I see how it goes.
Right. So I've been watching a lot of Don Rickles clips on late night recently. So anyway, all right.
We're gonna find another hobby. Okay.
What?
You ready?
Oh, you're turning into Don Rickles now. You think you're the insult comic? Do you think Johnny Carson's gonna sit here and start laughing or something?
Let's get to football because it's just a few days away.
You're Conan O'Brien at best.
At best, hey, that's not bad. That's one of the nicer things you said to me lately.
Lately. Okay. All right. Give us your prediction for the Duke Clemson game. Tell us who you think is going to win and what the final score is, and give us your reasoning. Show your work.
Well, I'm just absolutely excited to have the opportunity to do this. Almost as excited as I am about the fact that we have Coach Elko in charge of the program now. I finally feel safe again returning to my annual preseason prediction of the Blue Devils finishing 10-2. I feel very confident in that. And I see no way that Clemson's going to be one of those 2 losses. That coach down there has gone out and got himself a new offensive coordinator, but he's expecting some sort of return to college playoff glory. But these aren't the Blue Imps he's used to beating up on. And the Blue Devils have a balanced attack. Lots of their offense is returning. We've got Elko now in his second year, and undoubtedly we'll see some things on defense as well as offense that we didn't see the first season. And I think the Tigers might even they've had a couple of people that apparently are not going to be part of the game. Not sure how big an influence that's going to be. That's always a part of football and sport in general. I think. Oh no. Sorry, Ben. Can you stop it right there?
No, just. No, you can't. It's got to be live. You can't edit these things in a podcast. It's not possible.
Oh man, sorry about that. I don't know what she sensed outside. So I need to start all over.
No. You're good. Just run with it. It's probably Dabo showing up to the house to try to sabotage your prediction.
Yeah,
that's what I think.
I think the dogs, who are both Blue Devil fans, saw a Clemson fan going by or something. But I think this could go either of 2 ways. I think it could be surprisingly low scoring, or it could be a shootout, which is probably what most people think and maybe are even hoping for, and thinking the Blue Devils could possibly win in a shootout. And I think they have a good chance of winning, whichever way this thing turns. But I'm going to go with slightly higher scoring as the outcome here, and I kind of like the Blue Devils winning by a couple, probably somewhere in the low 30s. I'm going to say 34-32 as the Tigers get themselves in trouble going for 2 points early and have to do it again later. Blue Devils get a big stop. Field goal turns out to be the difference. I'm going with 34-32. Duke's off and running on their way to 10-2.
So things are good. Things are good in Richlandia, huh? Do I have that correct?
Man, things are always good. Things are always good here, and I'm confident. I'm confident, and I just hope the guys stay healthy. They're really good about next man up, but you never know. People get hurt, and of course we've already had somebody that we were hoping that was going to be a big impactful player is going to miss part of the season, but I think the next man up is going to make a difference for us, and looking forward to it.
Ada, you walked in here. Do you want to make a prediction for the game?
I think I still have my go to hell Carolina mug somewhere.
That'd be awesome. Ada's saying no game prediction.
That's all right. You tell my granddaughter and give her a big hug and tell her I love her and tell her to be nice to Ben Dad on his birthday.
All right. Now wait. Before you go, so you got Duke winning. You got Duke going 10-2. Who are the 2 losses to?
Well, you just never know. Honestly, I can't really see anybody on the schedule that can handle us. But, the likelihood of, an injury, right before a game or, maybe looking ahead. I think that's Clemson's best shot at pulling this off. They might be looking ahead to the next game, instead of focusing on us. And, just it's on any given Saturday, as they say, something can happen that, you'd rather not have had happen for your team. I'm not going to pick out anybody in particular, but I think we're going to do well against a tougher schedule. Okay,
so that's 10-2. Dad has gone full Richlandia, and you never go full Richlandia. So thank you, Dad, for this prediction. We may check back with you again later on in this year to get some additional thoughts from you.
We'll be here. Happy birthday, son.
All right, thank you. All right, coming back from that, Chappell, you have sat through and listened to me ask you a lot of questions, make a lot of cheap yet probably accurate shots about Chapel Hill College. So I'm going to give you a chance, like I give everybody a chance to have an open mic. And I will also say this, since we're going to be there, I don't know what your schedule is like on game days. The 4 of us are going to be there. So if you want to catch up with us, have an adult beverage or 4, whatever, maybe something to eat, feel free to stop by and hang out. I will offer that to you for you having been a very good sport and listen to me abuse your alma mater. I will go ahead and mention for the record, I did go to college at Charleston, so I can also make a lot of statements about basketball that I could back up. I'm not going to. I'm just saying that I could, but I won't. So in return for me, again, abusing your school, I'm going to go ahead and give you an open mic to talk about whatever you want. And if you want to relive the 2018 Duke North Carolina football game, which I was also at, please go right ahead.
I appreciate you giving me the last word. I'm always down for some good rivalry trash talking. ACC reporter here, so those allegiances have kind of been hammered out of me. We're in college at the DTH, so I'm always objecting around here and happy to engage in some UNC Duke trash talk. I do think the basketball game should always start midweek. I don't like that they've been doing them on the weekends for the opening game. I just think the buzz on campus for that first game in February, one way or the other, is epic. I was on campus the year that Obama came to watch Zion shoe break, and earlier in that day, there were rumors flying around that he was at Cosmic Cantina on Franklin Street, and I watched like literal busloads of people, including one of my roommates, get off a bus stop early to go try to find him. I saw someone sprinting through the quad and like breaking their umbrella to try to catch him and his daughter on a J school tour. That doesn't happen on a Saturday. Give us some midweek contests for the greatest rivalry in college basketball. And yeah, 2018 UNC football Duke game, I remember they just folded down the stretch in the most Fedora era way, and that kind of predicted that demise. And a few games later, he was insisting that, nobody fought in the end zone against NC State. What fight? Our kids were celebrating. It's kind of a fitting way for that guy to go out. And yeah, I think just last two things from me. First of all, again, really appreciate the Union shout out. I haven't really been able to brag on them, so it's cool to come on expecting to talk football and get to talk about something that's really really important to me and our guild and a lot of other guilds around there. A unionized newsroom is a better newsroom, so I'm happy to talk about that. And then just shout out to you for supporting some local journalism. That's our McClatchy tagline, #read local. And feel like definitely I've had an opportunity to talk local here, so hopefully people read local too. But I really appreciate you having me on. I appreciate you asking such thorough stuff. I can tell you're a successful lawyer for a reason. That's a career that I'm never going to get into, but I'm always respected and will respect. I was a big Supreme Court class guy in college and enjoyed my Poly 202 and such, and had a poli-sci minor. So that stuff is really fun to me. And I'm glad to hear that you're doing well on that and still finding time to talk some Duke football on the side. So I really appreciate it. To come on and hopefully your listeners know a little bit more about Clemson and what they're going to see on Labor Day night because of it. So thanks again.
Well, Chappell, thanks a lot for coming on. This was a very informative talk. I think we've all learned a lot about Clemson. I think we've all gotten to know the Tigers a little bit better, and we've gotten to know maybe what to expect in the first game of the season. I'm looking forward to being there. I hope I'm not too old that I can stay up late and make it through the game, but I don't know. It gets harder and harder with each passing day, but I'm very excited. I'm looking forward to it. And I want to thank everybody who listens, everybody who takes the time to engage on Twitter and on Instagram to keep the discussion about Duke football going. I want to give a shout out to the guys over at the Duke Football Talk Section 17 podcast. They do a lot of great work. So follow them, check them out. I'm sure everybody who listens to this probably already listens to them anyway, but with new listeners, because of the different format that we're doing this year, hopefully some of you guys who want to know more about the Blue Devils, who are Clemson fans, will migrate over there and listen to Duke Football Talk. Now, one thing I mentioned in the last interview, and it looks like this is getting a little bit closer here, but we're getting some feedback from someone with the North Carolina program. But I can't do more tonight because we've run out of time. But it's looking legit, and looks like that will happen. We're working on a little scheduling things for that. In the interim, we've got more interviews lined up for this coming season. Continue to follow us at Duke FB Coverage on Twitter. Check us out, bullcitycoordinators.com. Send us an email, bullcitycoordinators@gmail.com. And, our DMs are open. So hit us up on Twitter whenever. We're always happy. I'm always happy to talk Duke football with you guys, talk about expansion, talk about whatever. So with all that said, please continue to listen, continue to go to the site. And as always, go Duke.